Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of American Potential Now. I'm your host, David Fromm. If you haven't watched one of these Now episodes, what we do is talk about something that is making news. And the big headline is the government shutdown at midnight on September 30th. And get this, most Americans, like 61%, don't even agree with it. Here's what happened. The House actually passed something called a clean continuing resolution. That just means it was simple, no extra spending. Just enough, really to keep government running until November. But when it got to the Senate, it failed by 5 votes. They needed 60, which means 7 Democrats would have had to vote for it. And they didn't. So now we're sitting here with the government shutdown. And some people are asking, if it was clean, no strings attached, why didn't Democrats just vote to keep the doors open? Let's talk about that with our guest, who is the chairman of the Appropriations Committee and represents Oklahoma's 4th Congressional District. I want to welcome Chairman Tom Cole to the podcast. Mr. Chairman, welcome.
Hey, David, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. At a really interesting time for the Congress. Can you just take us, through how we came to shut down and what are your thoughts on where we're at right now?
Sure. Well, frankly, we shouldn't be in a shutdown. It's really a pretty simple thing. We've been trying to restore the appropriations process. We're operating under a continuing resolution now that, many Democrats, particularly in the Senate, supported. But we're running out of time. We're at September 30th was the end of the fiscal year. And while we had moved all 12 bills that are the normal product of the Appropriations Committee out of the committee, 3 of them representing over 60% of all federal spending across the floor, and we're engaged in constructive discussion with our Democratic counterparts on 3 major bills that we wanted to bring to the floor to package, we're about to run out of time, and the government was shut down. So to avoid that, we offered what's called, as you described in your introduction, a clean continuing resolution. That just simply means we kept things exactly as they are. The Democrats who I negotiated with were my appropriations counterparts, asked for 2 things. They said, keep it clean, and we agreed with that. No partisan tricks, no gimmicks, no poison pills, just keep things as they are. And let's put a relatively short time limit on it. The Trump administration actually asked for us to go into January. The Democrats wanted to go to some point in November. I actually agreed with them. The longer you wait, in Congress, the first thing you learn is deadlines are like alarm clocks. Nobody does anything until you get up close to them. So we gave the Democrats exactly what they wanted. Then their leadership decided to intervene and asked for some extraordinary things. They asked for the repeal, effectively, of all the Medicaid reforms in the one big beautiful bill, which I think is really one of the great parts of the bill. We actually dealt with some entitlement spending for the first time in many years. I'm really proud of Brett Guthrie and his team over in Energy and Commerce for doing that. They also asked for the continuation of some COVID era, Obamacare premium subsidies. Now, remember, you're already getting, if you're in Obamacare exchange, subsidized health care. But these were things that were added on top of that during the COVID era, simply because, we were shutting down a lot of businesses. A lot of people were losing their health care. Although it's worth noting, these things were actually done in, what were Democrat-only bills, reconciliation bills that no Republican voted for. Now, you total all of that, then they threw in a couple of odd things. They wanted to restore public funding for public television, something that we had removed in a rescissions package working with the president. And then they wanted the president to unilaterally give up the power of rescissions, that is, to reclaim money that he thinks is being inappropriately or unnecessarily spent. If you know Donald Trump very well, that's not likely to happen. So you total all these things together, they are over a 10-year period, would be about $1.5 trillion of extra spending, in exchange for which the Democrats were going to give us 4 weeks of government funding. That's a vast difference from our bill, which, again, clean bill, 7 weeks, let's produce some product. And then if we need to go further, let's get back into regular order of producing appropriations bills. So, again, we were able to pass our bill through the the House. I'm really proud of our leadership team, Speaker Johnson, Steve Scalise, particularly the whip team under Tom Emmer, Lisa McLean doing the messaging. They all did a great job. So we got it into the Senate, but the Senate, you got to get to 60 votes. Now, again, that's not a provision in the Constitution. That's not the law of the land. That's a Senate rule. But it's up to them to run the body that way they want to run it, and that's fine. But you got to have Democratic votes. There's only 53 of our folks, and we got almost all of them, but not every single one of them. And then we had to have 7 or 8 Democrats. We came up, as you pointed out, a few short. So we're now in a government shutdown. And that means, honestly, hundreds of thousands of Americans have been laid off, about 750,000 is the first estimate. A lot of others are working without getting paid. That includes our entire military, our border patrol, people like that, air traffic controllers. They still have to do their job because these are essential services, meat inspectors, and all sorts of people. But they're just not going to get a check, which is incredibly unfair to them. A lot of them, of course, have families to take care of. A lot of them got mortgages that they don't give you an extension on your mortgage. And a lot of them have car payments. So, again, we're doing this all for political theatrics because, again, what the Democrats have asked for, they're not likely to get. And they shut down the government, honestly, for political purposes that have nothing to do with the day-to-day funding. So it's a mess, but it's a really thoughtless, unfair act. And in the end, it'll cost us a lot of money because it'll end at some point. And normally we rehire most, if not all, of the people that were laid off. And guess what? They get all their back pay. And then they usually get a lot of overtime because you got to catch up on all the work that didn't get done. It's just absolutely insane what they've done.
Well, I think something that you said really seems appropriate, that it's really kind of political theater. And I think it's something, we stated how Americans don't like this, according to polling. We can see that it erodes trust in government. And it's political theater. And what's the path forward? I mean, do you see a constructive way forward from here?
Well, the path forward, honestly, is for the Senate to change its opinion and enough Democrats to break. And there's actually signs that may happen. Originally, there was only one Democrat or democratically aligned senator that was speaking out against this, and that was John Fetterman from Pennsylvania. When they had the initial vote, he was joined by 2 more, one from New Mexico and then the independent from Maine. And there may be others. I mean, because the way shutdowns work, and I've seen 3 of them in my time in Congress, none of them ever succeed in the objective that was laid out. But, life gets worse every single day for Americans. Needed services aren't provided. People that are providing essential services aren't paid. And it always costs more money to reopen government than it actually saved when you temporarily shut it down. So it's a very ineffective tool. But in this case, you really have the Democratic left wing demanding that Schumer shut it down. I mean, Donald Trump really is in the head of the other side, so to speak. And so this is an irrational strategy to pursue an unattainable goal. Now, what you need to do is just sit down and negotiate with us. That's what the process was going on in the Appropriations Committee. Obviously, we're trying to save money, and so we've proposed sensible cuts, but we will negotiate, and we can come to a situation where the government is never shut down and all the parties agree. Nobody will get everything they want, and that's what the Democrats are trying to get by shutting down the government. Literally everything they want. I mean, who would ever agree to $1.5 trillion of extra spending for 4 weeks of funding for government? I mean, it's nonsensical. So again, I think sooner or later they're going to be forced to blink. I don't think our leadership is likely to do it. I certainly don't think President Trump will do it, and we'll reopen. But we will have lost weeks of time. We will have done a lot of damage to individual Americans. And honestly, we will have spent more money than we would have spent had we just continued government operations per normal and negotiated new bills, which is what we were doing when Democratic leadership, Minority Leaders Jeffrey and Schumer, decided they were going to pull this stunt by adding things that have nothing to do with normal approach into the negotiation.
So, you're the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, which is a very important role. When you talk about returning to regular order, what does that really mean, and what's it going to take to actually get back to normal, on time funding process?
Well, first of all, we fund the day-to-day operations of the government through 12 separate bills. All of those bills ought to be voted on individually, first in committee. We have actually done that part. Every one of those bills has moved through the Appropriations Committee on our side of the rotunda. The Senate has only done 6, but look, that's actually better than they've ever done. Under Senator Schumer, and I've gotten 3 of them across the floor. Senator Schumer didn't get a single appropriations bill done when he was actually the majority leader, and left us in quite a mess for Majority Leader Thune to have to deal with. So you got to do that. You get the bills through, then you sit down. There'll be a different version in the Senate and the House. You negotiate between those. You come to an agreement. You bring the bills back to Congress. They have to pass both houses and be signed by the president. And the president's not an innocent bystander in all this. He's got to sign the legislation. So you're dealing, as you should be, with the administration on a regular basis. They will have sent you their budget, their sort of view, but in the end, Congress makes the final decision on this. But again, unless you can override a presidential veto, you've got to include the chief executive, and that's the way we're supposed to do it. This fiscal year is supposed to be done between September 30th of one year and September 30th of the next. The reason why we were a little bit behind schedule this year is we spent the opening 6 months plus of the year trying to get the big, beautiful bill done. A new president never gets us a presidential budget on time. It's supposed to be there by February 15th. That's impossible if you're inaugurated on January 19th. You don't even have the president didn't have a secretary of the Treasury, didn't have an OMB director by that point. So you got to give him some latitude. So all those things took up a little time. I'm still pretty proud the committee, again, got all 12 bills done, got them done before September 30th, got the majority of the money across the floor of the House, and was in serious negotiations that were almost concluded with the Democrats. And then we have this stunt by Schumer and Jeffries, where they start, asking for unattainable things. If they don't get them, they're going to shut down the government. Our people reasonably say, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to actually pass bills, and we're going to pass a time frame that's short. And we're going to give you what you asked for, and we're going to keep working on the problem. But we don't want to, Donald Trump doesn't want to shut down the government of the United States. He's made that abundantly clear. Neither do our colleagues or Republican colleagues in the Senate, and neither are members in the House. And that extends across the spectrum from our most conservative members to our most moderate members. They all still believe the government ought to be kept open and operating. And it's really Democratic. I actually think the majority of Democrats believe that too. But I think their political base and, again, their leadership have led them into a really bad place. And, they're really not representing, obviously, how they normally would operate. In the past, Democrats have chastised Republicans, personally, I think appropriately so, when we've tried to shut down the government and extort something. And again, it just doesn't work. Forget the morality of it or the wisdom of it. Nobody's ever achieved their objective by shutting down the government. When we did it over Obamacare, we didn't repeal Obamacare. When we did it over building the wall, we didn't finish the wall. When the Democrats did it, and people forget they've done it over DACA, they weren't able to achieve their objective. They're not going to achieve their objective this time either. It's just, I don't know how many times you have to prove this out. If you play football, and 3 times 2 different teams try a play and it's a bust every time, maybe it's just a really bad play and you shouldn't do it. So it's unbelievable to me that they chose the course they did, but it's damaging to the country.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I've watched, I've been around Congress for a few decades, and
You have my deepest sympathy.
yeah, thanks. Fortunately, I'm from afar at this point, but passing appropriations bills on time is kind of unusual, unfortunately, and I give you a lot of credit for that. What's also unusual, from what I've watched, is to have a chairman of the Appropriations Committee really calling out the federal debt and our runaway spending. And you wrote a great piece in the Wall Street Journal about the coming federal debt avalanche and what's really driving our debt and deficit. How would you sum that up, and what solutions do you discuss?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for mentioning that. And there is a lot of misunderstanding. There's an assumption that the Appropriations Committee is in control of all federal spending. Actually, we're not. And it's a small and diminishing portion of the federal budget we control. Let me give you a couple numbers that make the point. 1981, when our longest serving member of the House, a legendary appropriator, Hal Rogers, arrives to Congress, and Ronald Reagan arrives to the White House, the Appropriations Committee appropriated 45% of the total federal budget. The rest was Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, interest on the debt, and about 9.8% of the gross national product of the richest country in the world, the United States of America. Today, we appropriate 26% of the federal budget, and we only appropriate 6.4% of the gross national product. So actually, our share of the federal budget, which I sort of I'm happy about, has gotten smaller. Our footprint's not what it was. So what explains the explosion in spending? Well, mostly the growth in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and interest on the debt built up, year in and year out. Those are the things that drive it. Now, some of that is driven by forces that are not bad things. Look, Americans are living a lot longer. When we set up Social Security, the average American lived to 63. You got your first check at 65. Only the government would give you a deal like that. Now, the reality is, obviously, people live to 65, but most of them were gone by the time they were in their middle 70s. Today, you get to 65, you have a 50% chance of living to 85. You've got about a 25% chance of living to 93 or 94. Now that I'm 76, I think this is a really good thing, but you better adjust the funding to make out. And we now have the largest generation in American history retiring at 10,000 a day for the next 17, 18 years. And they're either all already on or soon will be on Social Security, and they're immediately eligible for Medicare. So you have those things. And then we've had, and to be fair, both parties have done this, whether it's Medicare Part D for Republicans or Obamacare for Democrats. These safety programs have both been enlarged and, frankly, their reserves drained to fund other efforts. So, again, you have to get a handle on the entitlement spending, and that takes some discipline. And we've done it before, though. 1983, we were 3 months short of a 17% across the board cut in Social Security. And Ronald Reagan, Tip O'Neill, so it was bipartisan, Howard Baker, worked together, passed a bill that created a commission. They gave them about a year to figure out a problem, and then they had to pass it up or down, no amendments, in about 60 days. And I actually have a bill with former member John Delaney. We just went back and basically did the same thing. So you've got to do something like that, or you've got to do something like Brett Guthrie did. He really, I don't think this has gotten anywhere near the press it deserves. Our chairman of Energy and Commerce in the big, beautiful bill went back and made some hard decisions on Medicaid, but they were sensible decisions. Like, okay, we're not paying Medicaid if you're an illegal person in the country. Number two, we're going to make sure that you're actually eligible. We have a high error rate, people being put on that shouldn't be there at all. And we're going to penalize states who actually operate the program if they have above a 6% error rate. My own home state in Oklahoma has about a 10.8%. So, we should be paying more, or we should fix our errors. Then you add some things, again, more frequent checks in terms of eligibility, because people move in and out of eligibility for Medicaid. None of this, by the way, would affect the people that the program was designed for. That is, people with disabilities and single parents with children. They'll all still be there. But we've raised the income stuff, and we put in some things like, hey, if you're going to get Medicaid, you got to either be working, or you've got to be spending 20 hours a week looking for work, or you've got to spend 20 hours a week training for a new position. I mean, some minimal things. If you're going to get free health care from the government, we have millions of people getting it, some of them making a lot of money, multiple times the poverty rate. You have to, we're going to take you off the rolls. And so these were all very sensible reforms by Brad Guthrie, Chairman Guthrie, and those are the kind of common sense changes we need to do. This was actually a first step. And so the big, beautiful bill, we tend to think of it mostly as a tax cut bill, making the 17 tax cuts permanent, adding the new Trump tax cuts aimed at working Americans, no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, helping people that are essentially retired, collecting Social Security, but that's all they've got. It really helps, quite frankly, older women in particular, who quite often didn't get to work outside the home and in the generations they grew up in. So they did a lot of work, but they didn't accumulate much in the way of Social Security benefits, this thing. So it's got those things, but then, and it's got things like border security and defense. But this piece of actually tackling a mandatory program will still increase spending every single year for the next 10 years on Medicaid, but the rate of increase will drop dramatically. CBO projected the savings at about $1.4 trillion in the whole bill. The majority of that came from what Brett Guthrie did on energy and commerce, although we trimmed back a lot of other programs as well.
At AFP, we were thrilled with the One Big Beautiful Bill and the leadership that the president and the majority showed there. I think there was a lot of courageous things in there. And then, fighting on this against the shutdown and trying to get to a sensible place, and then just generally against spending is.
I just really want to compliment you. If we were doing this in my district office, I have a big thank you placard from Americans for Prosperity. A bunch of my Republicans had signed it. I think it was a Republican Women's Club or whatever. But the grassroots door-to-door explaining of the bill, showing what the stakes were and how we could make significant progress. You guys did an unbelievable job, and member after member will tell you that, because at the end of the day, you go home, you got to explain it, and it certainly helps when you're not out there by yourself. There are people that have done the hard work, made the political decision. They're going to be involved in civics, and they're better than the congressman talking to the constituent is the neighbor talking to the neighbor. You trust your neighbor, your neighbor, and your role was enormously helpful in getting this legislation passed.
Well, really appreciate that, and we appreciate the great legislation you guys passed, and then continuing this fight against runaway spending and trying to have responsible government. Chairman Cole, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you taking some time. And we hope to have you on again.
Anytime, David. Again, thanks for the terrific work Americans for Prosperity does all over the country. And again, you guys were a huge part of the success of getting that legislation passed, and you're absolutely critical in educating the American public on sound economic policy and fiscal discipline, and it makes a difference.
Thanks. Yeah. Hey, folks, if you like this episode and would like to stay connected with the podcast, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, as well as following us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And always remember, liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on the next episode.